Yo, what's up guys, how are you all doing today? It's FanFic Reader here, and today we are taking a break from the Avengers of Steel story, the What If Superman was in the MCU, and we're replacing it with What If Master Chief met Commander Shepard. What if Halo and Mass Effect merged together? What if characters from Halo came into Mass Effect during the events of the third game? Now, this story was created by Cream of Wheat 2311. It is a massive, nearly 500,000 word story. It's been very well loved by the community. It is the most favoured crossover between Halo and Mass Effect. And speaking of Halo and Mass Effect, two of arguably the most well-known, most well-put-together sci-fi games in gaming. I mean, seriously, when you think of sci-fi and gaming, those two are usually the ones that come to mind. So I hope you all very much enjoy this. Let's get started. To Infinity. Chapter 1, Gateway. UNSC in Infinity, Deep Space. With a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and a datapad in the other, Admiral Thomas Lasky walked easily onto the bridge. The two Marine bridge guards saluted, and Lasky nodded back as the bridge doors slid to open his approach. As he stepped past the threshold, the familiar sound of the Infinity's command and control center drifted through his ears. Presses on holographic keyboards, the soft crackles of comm channels, and a quiet conversation. His eyes took comfort in the sight of the walls, bordered by operational terminals and those who worked on them, the central holotables, and the forward viewpoints, which gave a clear view into the inky blackness of space. This was his element, and this is where he felt most at home. Lasky's eyes met Sergeant Julius, the leader of the bridge guard. "Admiral on deck," he acknowledged, snapping to attention and raising a crisp salute, while the rest of the bridge guard officers did the same. The Admiral touched his datapad to his temple and gave an easy smile. "As you were, Admiral." The title was still something he was getting used to, even 8 months after the fact. It certainly felt like it hadn't been that long, since he was still just a commander, back when he was running the ground operations back on Requiem, alongside the Master Chief. The simple fact was that after the brutal 30-year war of attrition, the UNSC officer corps was severely depleted, the venerable Lord Hood being forced now more than ever to confront the eternal enemy. Time. Wouldn't be around for much longer to serve as that most weathered and dedicated pillar upon which the UNSC had greatly relied on. UNSC HICOM instituted a new program where young officers who had proven themselves with distinction in the heat of battle were fast-tracked into a high command position. It was part forward-thinking pragmatism and part desperate necessity. So now Lasky, whose main claim to distinction was by not letting the UNSC's most advanced and expensive warship ever created meet an unforeseen fiery end, was now the proud owner of the rank of Admiral. The 4 silver stars still felt heavy on each side of his collar. He settled into his command chair and took a swig of his coffee, rich, flavourful and warming. Navy coffee was always damn good. Marine coffee, on the other hand. Setting his drink down on the armrest, Lasky began to thumb over his datapad, checking for any important messages. Not finding any, the Admiral tapped in a few commands and brought up his guilty pleasure. The weekly War Games results between the Infinity Spartan 4 teams. The recent Wargame competitions had been the brainchild of the Master Chief, and the culmination of over 5 months of intense training courtesy of Blue Team. There had been a noticeable improvement in the performance of the Spartan 4s during their training, so much so that the Master Chief had rated their performance as passing. High praise indeed coming from the Master Chief. Nevertheless, a strong spirit of competition had risen amongst the teams as a result, and Commander Palmer had organised a tournament of matches to find out which team really was the best of the best. Lasky checked his chrono out of the corner of his eye. Monday, 2 AM. Not that night and day mattered much on a warship, as you aligned yourself around your shift, but it did mean that all the wins and losses would have been reported by now. Scrolling through the data, Lasky raised his eyebrows upon seeing that Crimson and Majestic teams, 2 of the top-ranked Spartan 4 squads on the ship, had fought each other to a draw for the top spot. Surprising, considering that Crimson had a long history of victory over Majestic, but that gap had been slowly closing over the past few months. Any more thoughts he had on that line were interrupted when he saw that Castle team had thoroughly trounced Lancer team in an incredible upset in the 3rd round. Lasky scowled. He had bet Sergeant Julius a bottle of Arcadian Scotch on a Lancer victory. He looked over to the sergeant's post only to see a subtle but knowing smile on his face. Lasky waved a finger in his general direction and couldn't help but chuckle to himself. He took a sip of coffee, letting the sounds and conversations throughout the bridge wash over him. I still don't understand why our shore leave had to be postponed for a couple of squid heads. A couple? I wouldn't count an entire assault carrier as a couple, Hernandez. Okay, Lewis, sure. More than a couple of squid heads. All I'm saying is that right now, I could be relaxing on a beach with a beer in one hand and a girl in the other. But instead, I'm stuck in the middle of space waiting for His Majesty the Arbiter. The beer, I believe. The girl, not so much. Shut it. You forget, Hernandez, the Arbiter played as much a role in saving humanity from the flood as the Master Chief did. Oh sure, but where was he when the Didac attacked Earth? Too busy repopulating on Sangalios, if you know what I mean. Lasky chose that moment to interrupt. While we were fighting the Didac, the Arbiter was up in his neck trying to protect Sangalios from the Loyalist fleet. There was nothing he could have done to help us, and we would have done the same in his position. I understand you still have some strong feelings towards the Sangali, Lieutenant Hernandez. But you have to remember we are still allies. Sorry, Admiral, you're right, was the response from the Infinity's chief weapons officer. Lieutenant Lewis, the comms officer, swiveled in her chair so that she was facing Lasky. Her hair was tucked underneath her duty cap in a tight bun, and her dark, perspective eyes posed her question for her. This is still a little strange, sir. We've heard almost nothing from the Sangheli for 2 years, and then their leader rings up HICOM on an encrypted channel and asks to meet in the middle of nowhere? You're right, Lieutenant. This is a bit strange, but the Arbiter is a friend, and I'm sure that whatever he wants to discuss, especially with this sort of secrecy, has to be important. The unusual situation got Lasky thinking. It had been 8 years since the end of the Human Covenant War, and 3 years since the Master Chief had defeated the Didact. During that time, the alliance that had been brokered between humanity and the Sangheli by the Arbiter had remained cordial, to say the least. Hostilities had immediately ceased between the two factions, but after almost 30 years of brutal war, each side was still a little wary of each other. Sure, there had been a few exchanges of knowledge, minor technologies had been swapped from warships of both sides, and there was a tentative yet lucrative growing trade agreement. However, the general consensus among the human colonies was that humanity was far better off trying to rebuild the infrastructure and fortify the defences of the planet that they still possessed, as well as continue the frantic search for Forerunner technology. Involving themselves in the happenstances of their former enemy was considered to be an unwanted drain on their already limited resources. The Sangheli have echoed this response, too caught up in trying to secure their own worlds and fleets while at the same time being embroiled in a civil war with the remnants of the Covenant loyalists, those still loyal to Jul Umdama and the Storm. Recent loyalist activity on the border of the outer colonies had been giving HICOM some sleepless nights. Orders had been dispatched to Infinity to link up with the task force Yorktown after a short shore leave, and then investigate the loyalist sightings. The Infinity had been loaded up before with their patrol for a long-term deployment, and Lasky had been told to deal with any loyalists he encountered on the way as he saw fit. The separatist Sangheli leadership had been informed of the UNSC's intentions so as to not make them skittish about a UNSC battle group operating close to their territory. To put matters straight, both sides had been far too focused on their own dealings to pay much attention to the other. So when the leader of the separatist Sangheli had contacted the UNSC asking for a meeting in the middle of deep space, more than a few eyebrows had been raised, especially on the verge of Infinity linking up with battle group Yorktown. But what if it isn't the Shadow of Intent coming to meet us? What if this is some loyalist trap? Questioned Hernandez. I love popping Covey ships as much as the next weapons officer, Admiral, but we're on our own out here. That's been taken into account, and it's why our shields are up and our slip space drives are charged. Isn't that right, Roland? On the central table, a small orange-tinted figure of a human male dressed in heavy fur coat and pullover hat of a World War II bomber pilot materialized into view. Aye, aye, Admiral. Shields peaking at 100% and we're ready to jump at your word, relayed the Infinity's resident artificial intelligence. Lasky nodded. Excellent. How much longer until the Shadow of Intent arrives? Shouldn't be too much longer. We've pinged their slipspace signature when they were 10 minutes away. That was 3 minutes ago, replied Roland. Very well, said Lasky. Keep me posted. The remaining minutes passed quickly and in relative silence, with the bridge crew getting ready for their guest's arrival. Lasky's eyes were diverted away from his datapad by Roland's announcement. Admiral, Slipspace portal opening a few thousand kilometers off our bow. Size and readings typical with that of a CAS class assault carrier. Even from a distance, Lasky could see the purple-black of the slipspace portal distorting the space around it, silhouetted against the stars. Out of the portal smoothly emerged a large, gleaming silver warship with a bulbous, whale-like front and a sleek silhouette. The vessel, clearly a warship, radiated gracefulness, but Lasky knew hidden beneath that curved lines of sleek hull were enough firepower to take on a small fleet and win. Admiral, sensor readings identify the ship as the Shadow of Intent. They're holding steady at their current position and their shields are up. But their weapons are cold like ours, he heard from Roland. Sir, message coming through. The Arbiter has requested permission to take a Phantom over and dock, said Lewis. Granted. Direct his dropship to the bridge hangar bay, replied Lasky. Tell him that we'll be there to greet him in person. Lewis nodded, and with that, Lasky stood up out of his chair and made his way for the hallways. Stepping out of the bridge, Lasky saw a gathering of 6 Marines in a corridor alongside a single Spartan 4 adorned in a pale white Mjolnir Gen 2 power armor. Lasky approached the group, the Marines fell in formation behind him, and the Spartan took steps beside him. Commander Palmer, Lasky addressed. Admiral, replied the head of the Infinity's 3 Spartan 4 companies and his close friend. Lasky glanced up at Palmer, a few inches taller than him when she was in her armor. Permission to be honest, sir? Asked Palmer. Lasky smirked a little. The two had known each other for long enough that when they were alone, they barely bothered with such formalities. Granted, he answered. I'm not sure how I feel about letting the leader of the elite onto the Infinity, sir, she said. Lasky nodded in understanding. When first unveiled, the Infinity had been advertised as the peak of human achievement up to that point. While they weren't wrong, the Infinity was indeed the most powerful and technologically advanced warship humanity had ever built. Fleetcom certainly did its best to keep it away from prying eyes, especially after Requiem. For the past couple of years, Lasky's ship had been forced into a more moral-boosting tours, naval demonstrations, shipping lane patrols, or the minor counterinsurgency action across UNSC space. Safe assignments, sure, but they were certainly lacking excitement. It's alright, Palmer. The Arbiter's just here to talk. Palmer relaxed a little at Lasky's calm tone. I know that, sir. What worries me is what exactly he's here to talk about. It's been nearly 2 years since we've heard nearly anything from the Sangheili leadership. And all of this time we've just assumed that the silence was good. I understand your concern, Palmer. Those facts have not been lost to me. Also, there's a rumour going around on the ship that the elites might have found a Forerunner artifact. Maybe another Halo. I mean, they never told us they wouldn't look for Forerunner tech, Admiral. What if they found the Flood again? And they're being slaughtered and coming to us out of desperation. The Flood is gone. Destroyed with the Ark, Lasky said coldly and firmly. Even so, he felt shivers run down his spine. Every human had seen the vids, whether it be from Earth or if they had the right security clearance like him. Footage from the Halo arrays and the Ark. If there was one thing Lasky hoped he would never see in person, it was the Flood. Thankfully, his concern was widely shared, resulting in extremely strict procedures involving an excavation and analysis process whenever Forerunner tech was discovered. They rounded a corner, the door to the bridge hangar in sight toward the end of the corridor. Still, sir, I can't shake this funny feeling I have in my gut. I mean, we're overstocked for a long-term deployment and every branch has gotten quite a bit of new toys. Lasky nodded, thinking back to the reports his quartermasters had sent him. UNSC R&D had indeed given the Infinity an unusual amount of new tech. Most weren't anything major, a few upgrades to ammunition or weapons or computer systems, but there were a few things that people were excited about. Word on the ship was that the ODSTs were giggling like schoolgirls at some new armour they got. He reminded himself to ask Lieutenant Colonel Dare about that when he got the chance. Palmer frowned. Think the Sun face to face with the elites has anything to do with our pending redeployment? Well, we're about to find out, and try not to come across as too threatening, Lasky said, trying to bring some levity to the situation. Palmer just nodded, detaching her helmet from a belt and sliding it over her head. She was on duty now. 6 Marines, 1 Spartan 4 and 1 Admiral entered the small hangar. Dominated on one side was the angular hull of a Pelican dropship, and the other by the rounded purples and greens of a Covenant Phantom. Standing tall and proud just in front of the Phantom was the Arbiter himself, the aura of his presence unmistakable. Lasky strode towards him, eyeing the intricate engravings adorning his dull grey armour. He then noted the energy sword and plasma rifle attached to his hips. Two Sangheili in sleek jet black armour flanked the Arbiter just as armed as he was. Lasky recognised them as the Sangheili Spec Ops warriors. Lasky was not intimidated, as he was confident in the ability of Palmer and the Marines to keep him safe. If worse came to worse, he had a pistol on his right hip, and ever since Requiem, UNSC naval BDUs have been upgraded with armour plating in vital areas. Not enough to stop a direct blow from an energy sword, but enough to protect him from a glancing plasma shot. The UNSC Admiral stayed on his course, towards the alien much larger than himself. As Lasky approached, the Arbiter bowed his head in a sign of respect and clutched his right arm across his chest. "Admiral Lasky, I am deeply grateful you have granted me this audience," the Sangheili said in a deep, baritone voice. "Of course, Arbiter. Welcome to the Infinity. It's an honor to have you aboard." "Shall we go to the conference room?" answered Lasky with his voice calm and confident. The Arbiter nodded, then turned to his two guards and raised her hand, signalling them to stay with the Phantom. Lasky gave Palmer a look and she turned to the Marines, telling them through their helmet radios to stay within the hangar as well, to keep an eye on the Arbiter's companions. She turned back to Lasky and nodded. Lasky gestured towards the Arbiter and the two began to walk their way towards the bridge conference room in silence, Palmer falling in a respectable distance behind them. When they reached their destination, Lasky told Palmer to stand guard outside the door. They entered, and almost immediately the towering elite started to pace back and forth, hands behind his back. "I trust there are not any outside ears listening in, Admiral." The UNSC officer peered towards the ceiling. "Roland, that means you. That's an order." Lasky was met by silence, but he knew that the willful AI would follow his orders. "I will get right to it, Admiral," the Sangheili began, stopping his movement and facing Lasky. "We have discovered something, and we need your help." Lasky frowned at his eyebrows. "Discovered what?" The Arbiter reached into a pouch in his arm and withdrew a flat disc. Setting it on the table, from the disc sprang a holographic of what looked like nothing more than a small round sphere. A set of coordinates that Lasky didn't recognize was floating off to the side. Lasky was puzzled. "What is it?" "We do not know," answered the Arbiter. "On her patrol one of our cruisers, the Ancestral Light, was picking up some unusual sensor readings and diverted to investigate. The ship managed to transmit this picture just before we lost contact. Another cruiser, the Divine Sustenance, was also sent, but nothing has been reported since." "You've heard nothing?" Lasky said, still looking at the blurry sphere. "Nothing. The Sangheili Council had dismissed the discovery as unimportant, and are unwilling to send more ships to ascertain the object's nature, especially after the loss of 2 cruisers. They said that they did not want to weaken our defenses, even though there have been no major loyalist activity in 3 months. Technically, I'm not supposed to be here. The Shadow of Intent is supposed to be conducting a long-range reconnaissance mission." The Arbiter's mandibles pressed together, the equivalent to pursing one's lips, and his tone grew sorrowful. "I knew the shipmaster of the Ancestral Light. He was a good friend. He and his ship have stood by my side for many years, through many hardships and uncertainties. And now all that remains of him is this," he said, waving towards the holographic sphere. "I want to know what happened to my comrades, Admiral, and I want to know what has caused their disappearance. This object, what few scientists we have were unable to determine what it was or its purpose, based on the extremely limited information we have. That is why I am here. I need your help, Admiral. Humanity's help. I know that you have entire departments within your Navy dedicated to the study and research of such artifacts. We would as well, but we lack both the knowledge and personnel to do so." Lasky put a hand on his chin. "So what exactly are you asking of the Infinity? To accompany you to this artifact? Why not just go yourself? The Shadow of Intent is a more than powerful enough ship." The Arbiter paused. I will admit, Admiral, I am a little apprehensive about going alone, as well as the crew. Yet when we asked for help, we were not expecting a response at all from the humans, let alone sending their most powerful warship. Humanity and the Separatist Covenant are allies, Arbiter. We do our best to uphold that alliance, said Lasky as convincingly as he could. But I have to be practical. What's in it for us? The Arbiter couldn't help but chuckle to himself. I knew that question would come up sooner or later. It appears that is one area where humanity and Sangheili are the same. At least in these times. The elite's expression became more serious. Admiral, all I want is to find out what happened to my crew. Anything involving the artifact we will leave to you. Study, research, anything else. I just ask that whatever information you may recover from it may not be used to bring harm to my people. Lasky stood there, then nodded slightly. The Arbiter's last request wasn't exactly a guarantee to Lasky, but he was definitely not about to tell him that. Alright, I'll put the request towards Admiral Hood. The Arbiter nodded. Yes, Lord Hood is an honourable man, and has earned the respect of a great many of my kin, including myself. In fact, Admiral, urgent message from Fleetcom coming through. It's Admiral Hood, interrupted Roland. Lasky raised his eyebrows. Speak of the devil. Admiral Hood, how urgent? Delta classification, sir. Lasky paled. Delta level classification? Shit! This was neither extremely bad or extremely good. The Arbiter noticed the sudden change in Lasky's demeanour. His mandibles opened and closed in an unconscious show of confusion and concern. Arbiter, if you'll excuse me for a moment, Lasky said quickly, stepping out of the conference room. He hurried to his private office and activated the video terminal, straightening his BDUs as he did so. Within seconds, the chiselled face of the Fleet Admiral Sir Terence Hood replaced the black and grey static. Sir, said Lasky as he saluted, which Hood promptly returned. Admiral Lasky, listen up. Scientists deciphering a Forerunner archive on Oni Research Facility Trevelyan have found something. A Forerunner archive of some kind. The data decryption is incomplete, but from what we have managed to uncover this was the data archive that the librarian used to record the last phases of their war with the Flood, shortly before Halo's activation. It mentions the discovery of an object believed to be of precursor origin. The archive states that she had to abandon study of the object due to the Flood, but our scientists have managed to uncover the coordinates using Forerunner star charts included in the archive. The location has been sent to your ship's AI. Lasky pursed his lips. This was a little too coincidental for his likes. Precursor? He recognized the name. They had been the civilization that had come before the Forerunners, yet humanity still only knew so immensely little about the Forerunners, and far, far less about the Precursors, whoever they had been. Admiral Lasky, these are the same coordinates of the object the Arbiter wished to investigate, he heard the voice of Roland say. Roland, I thought I ordered you to stay out of the conference room, Lasky said, aggravated. I did, sir, but I may or may not have hacked into the Arbiter's holo device and scanned its contents when he landed. Damn, have the elites beat us to it? This could make things more complicated, said Hood, putting a hand to his chin. He knew that the Infinity was meeting with the Sangheili assault carrier. He was the one who ordered it. Not necessarily, sir, replied Lasky. The Arbiter and the Sangheili do not know the purpose or origin of the object. All they do know is that they lost 2 of their cruisers trying to investigate, and the Sangheili Council have decided not to look into it further at the moment. All the Arbiter wants is to find out what happened to his crews. He's already said that he would let the UNSC have full custody of the object. Well, I doubt he knew the object was precursor in origin either, chimed in Roland. Mumbled Hood. Alright, you're already the closest UNSC force in the area. Task Force Yorktown has just finished their replenishment operations. They'll be shipping out within the next few hours. I'm diverting them to rendezvous with you at the coordinates of this construct rather than at Novus Naval Station. But it will be a couple of days in slip space until they get there. I've already plotted our courses, sir. It will take the Infinity just under 4 hours to get there, informed Roland. Good, said Hood. Lasky, this is what you're going to do. Go to the coordinates, help the Arbiter find out what happened to his crews if you can, and try and get him to leave as soon as possible. No mentions about how Oni dug up what I just told you. In fact, don't mention we know anything about this thing at all. Run some preliminary tests, but stay cautious until the Yorktown science team arrives in 2 days. A lot of people were foaming at the mouth when they heard the word precursor, and both you and I know the potential implications of letting it fall into hands that are not ours. Yes, Admiral, acknowledged Lasky. You know what to do, Lasky. Hood out. The connection was cut. Lasky took a deep breath. He exited his office, walking quickly to the conference room where he left the Arbiter. As he entered, the Sangheili looked up to him and asked, "Is everything alright, Admiral?" Lasky did nothing but nod, trying to show no emotion. "The situation is under control. Now let's find out what happened to your cruisers." What am I looking at, Roland? The Infinity and the Shadow of Intent were holding at the edge of the maximum sensor range. They had just arrived in system. I'm not sure, Admiral, but it sure as hell is giving off some crazy readings. See for yourself. Lasky's datapad lit up. The UNSC Admiral scrolled through the data. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The object in question was a rounded sphere of unknown composition the size of a basketball, and it was giving off the gravitational field 3 times larger than Sol was. Lasky didn't even begin to try and think how unbelievably dense that thing had to be. Roland, are these readings accurate? Are you sure that something isn't wrong with the sensors? Lasky asked. No, Admiral. I've checked the data thousands of times. It's correct, replied the AI. The sensors also showed the sheared remains of 2 Covenant cruisers orbiting the object. Probably jumped in too close and were caught in the gravity well, unable to escape until they were crushed, hypothesized Mendez. Well, at least they know what happened to the Arbiter's ships, muttered Lasky. Sir, comm coming through the Shadow of Intent, revealed Lewis. Put it through, ordered Lasky. The distinct voice of the Arbiter radiated throughout the bridge. Everyone could hear the resigned sadness of his tone. There was no doubt that he could see the obliterated remains of 2 cruisers, just as well as those on the Infinity's bridge could. Admiral Lasky, we have found what we came here for. At least we have some form of closure. We will be returning to our original assignment soon. The object is all yours. The link closed, but Lasky noticed that he got a message on his datapad. It was from the Arbiter, most likely relayed through Roland. It read, "Be careful with this object. There is something about it that doesn't feel normal." Lasky put the datapad down and slowly walked over to the forward viewpoint. Even though he couldn't see the object at this distance, it certainly felt like he could. It made him feel uneasy, and a strange gnawing sensation formed in the back of his head. I don't like this. Helm, prep the slipspace generators. Let's back away to a further distance. Whoa! Admiral, the sensor readings just spiked off the charts. I mean, even more off the charts, said Lewis. In a moment that reminded Lasky of the Infinity being scanned by the didact on Requiem, a minor shockwave shook its way through the ship, vibrating the chairs and terminals and causing Lasky to grit his teeth. What was that, Roland? Asked the Admiral. I don't know, sir, some kind of energy pulse. It's not like anything I've ever seen. I recommend relocating the Infinity to a greater distance. Agreed. Prepare the ship for slipspace trans... Time seemed to pause for Lasky, as he suddenly felt a gut-wrenching falling sensation. The bridge of the Infinity dissipated around him. He found himself in... well, he didn't know where it was. He was standing, but on what he had no idea. His entire world was stark, blinding white light that seemed to penetrate every molecule of the air. Lasky squinted. He tried to shield his eyes with his hand, yet the light was somehow still able to get through. He closed his eyes, yet instead of the cooling black of his eyelids, the white still prevailed. He began to get dizzy and stumbled, yet he did not fall. Where am I? He asked, yet his mouth didn't move, his words only echoing in his head. A voice spoke. Lasky didn't so much as hear it as he did feel it. Unknown vibrations rumbling through his body, somehow forming words in his head. Hello, Thomas Lasky. Am I dead? No. Simply listening. Lasky was startled at the sudden voice, yet at the same time calmed, as if he had heard it before. Who are you? How do you know my name? I know all of your names. Were it not for my actions, your species, as well as every other in the galaxy, would have perished to the flood long ago. It is my guise that has guided your path to ascend to the mantle. If Lasky could move, his jaw would have dropped. Librarian? Yes and no. The librarian, the true librarian, died with the firing of the halo array long ago. I am but a ghost of her former self, a shell with only a single purpose. I was left behind while the others used the artifact to press forward. What purpose is that? To send you on your path. To reunite you with your true fate. Lasky felt his heart beating faster. I don't understand what path. And who were the others? The foreigners? The path that humanity should have walked long ago. Were it not for us. He had so many questions and had a strong suspicion that who or whatever this librarian copy was wouldn't be answering most of them. The artifact. What does it do? It is a gate. A door waiting to be opened. A door to where? The whiteness began to fade and Lasky reached out with his hand towards nothing. No, wait! The whiteness completely receded and Lasky fell into a hard, unforgiving black. Lasky came to with a start. He felt the cold metal underneath his hands, the blood in his mouth. As his senses came back to him, he could see that he was bathed in the red emergency lighting. The sirens blurred all around him. He immediately recognized that he was still on the Infinity Bridge, not that place that he had been before. Admiral, he heard as Sergeant Julius came into his field of vision, blood trickling down his cheek from an open wound on his temple. Get up, Admiral, he said, putting a gloved hand around Lasky's midsection. The bridge was in disarray. The crew members were writhing on the floor in pain, shouting towards each other, scarred and confused. Lasky struggled to get to his feet with the help of Sergeant Julius. Sit rep, he bellowed, waiting for an immediate handle on the situation. The voice of the AI Roland echoed throughout the bridge. Admiral, all major systems are currently undergoing a hard reset. Shields are offline, weapon systems are offline, slipspace capabilities are offline, sensors are offline, life support is online, main reactors are offline, secondary reactors are offline, tertiary reactors are online, central power is offline, emergency power is online. What the hell happened? Yelled Lasky, although in his guts he had a feeling he already knew. Unknown, sir. Not enough data to determine our circumstances, replied Roland. Just then the emergency lighting was cut out, only to be replaced seconds later by a dull white, flickering light. Secondary reactors are online. There is sufficient power active to our sensor suite, said Roland. Do it! Find out what's going on, ordered Lasky. Analyzing. We are 284,958 kilometers away from a large terrestrial planet. Initial scans show a heavily populated and industrialized surface. The planet does not match with any in the UNSC database. Warning, 72 unknown signatures ranging from Corvette to Destroyer class detected holding above the planet. Heat output typical with those of Warship class. They are now gathering together in a defensive position and orientating towards us. That got Lasky's attention. If these vessels had hostile intent, there wasn't a damn thing the Infinity could do to stop it. It was every ship's commander's worst nightmare. Unknown ships? Forerunner? He asked. Not likely. Signatures do not match typical composition of Forerunner vessels. Covenants? Insurrectionists? Lasky asked. Maybe, but if they are, these aren't the type of warship we've encountered. The Innies usually just repurpose our ships, and these are a remarkably different design. Can you show me? No, there's not enough power to operate the vid screen without compromising the little systems we have left. Lasky inhaled through his teeth. Is our situation so bad that turning on a single vid screen will deactivate our sensors? Yes, sir. I'm operating below minimum power requirements as it is. What about the Shadow of Intent? Are they here with us? Lasky inquired, wondering if they got dragged into the same situation the Infinity was. The Sankalia Soul Carrier is approximately holding 8,000 kilometers off our stern. Be advised, sensors indicate them to be in a similar situation to us. Admiral, I'm detecting a small signature typical with a strike craft launching from one of the unidentified ships and several orbital stations. They are forming a screen in front of the main formation of ships. Lasky grimaced, both because of the sudden onset of an excruciating headache and in light of our current situation. His mind immediately came to the conclusion that they had stumbled upon a hidden rebel planet, and Oni had made it clear that they hadn't encountered the insurrectionists' entire fleet. But then he remembered his talk with the librarian. Where had that artifact brought them? What about our objective that we were investigating? Is it still here? Negative. Lasky could do nothing but assume the worst. Not UNSC, not Covenant, not Forerunner. Hell, he would take the insurrectionists right now. Roland, I want our defensive and offensive capabilities back online, and I wanted it yesterday. The bridge lights dim, then went back to emergency red, with Roland saying, diverting power, shields at 1% and rising. Suddenly, the titanium plates that had fallen to protect the bridge in case of a critical systems failure disengaged from the main view screen of the bridge. Lasky's mouth dropped as he was met with the sight that every UNSC soldier knew. Planet scans complete. Wait, this can't be right, said Roland, disbelief bleeding through his synthesized voice as he no doubt ran millions of more equations and calculations. The AI looked from his spot on the holotable to Lasky. The UNSC officer met his bewildered gaze with one of his own. Admiral, I've ran the scans 1,000 times. The land masses, the bodies of water, they all match. This planet is Earth. Okay guys, and I'll leave it there. I hope you all enjoyed the first chapter of To Infinity, where the Mass Effect universe and the Halo universe converge into one. Now, again, I'd like to make this very clear. This is not my own design. This was all written by a very talented author by the name of Cream of Wheat 2311. I will leave a link to his profile and the full story in the description down below. If you want me to read any other fan fictions or anything like that, then let me know in the comments down below and I'll be sure to check it out. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next chapter.